Hello, I'm Gustavo Tolosa and I am in Sacramento, California. Yesterday, it was the conference, the Get Healthy Sacramento that Linda Millworks organizes. And it was great to hear four speakers. And I'm going back to Dallas today. I'm Gustavo Tolosa. And today we have Dr. Doug Lisle. And we're all excited to hear him as many times as we can get a hold of him. And he was one of the speakers yesterday, and it was wonderful to hear you, Dr. Lisle. And today we have a wonderful topic. But welcome. How are you doing today?
Good. Great to see you again, Gustavo. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's always nice. So today you're talking about something that I think is difficult for every human being, which is change, changing habits, changing ideas. So the topic is secrets to positive change. I know you have a lot of good stuff to share with us, so go at it.
Okay. There's a lot that goes through this, a lot to think about when it comes to making changes. So a lot of people in the McDougall program are already making those changes. And so what we want to do, though, is to understand, but some people may be contemplating change, or they fiddle with it, or they put their foot in the water for a little bit and then it comes back out. So what today I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about change in general, and so that we can really understand it and understand what things we should be focusing on when it comes to making positive changes. First of all, I'm going to be some heroes of mine, John Tooby and Lita Cosmides, who are these fabulous psychologists at the University of California, Santa Barbara, have a way of explaining human nature that has been somewhat unique here in the last 25 years. And what they say is that in order for you to understand somebody's position, it's useful for you to understand who they are arguing against. So I'm going to tell you who I'm arguing against, and then I'll explain my argument. And that's maybe a useful way for people to understand why I belabor the points that I do. The people that I'm arguing against are the position that you're going to make change by making some major changes about yourself or your personality through some spectacular insight about maybe something that changed for the wrong 30 years ago in your history. This is a very deep, dynamic, sort of dark view of human nature, is that something bad happened and that you got on the wrong track, and that's what's stopping you now. Some moment in time when some disappointing, terrible thing happened. This doesn't make a lot of sense to biologists, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to the modern psychologists who think the way I do. So now we're going to now reverse field. Now you know what I'm arguing against. What I'm arguing against is that the key to positive changes is some deep insight that we're going to have about some terrible thing in your history. Instead, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at what I believe are the sources of positive change now, or change in general. The reason why people do whatever they do at any minute of their lives is because they're running a cost-benefit analysis. They're actually, if you're going to decide to go to the gym, you're going to decide to go to the gym based on an estimation of the costs involved, in this case, the time and energy that you'll expend in doing that, versus the benefits that you think that you're going to get from doing this. And it's a complicated analysis. So if you thought that you could go to the gym and exercise for half an hour and then lose 10 pounds, everybody would be down there. It wouldn't be a problem. In fact, if you really thought that you were going to lose 1 pound, people would be down there and put in their half an hour without any trouble at all. And people would lose weight like crazy, and everybody would be svelte and beautiful. That's how it would work. The reason why that doesn't happen is because it's not true. People run the cost-benefit analysis, and they find out through their own efforts that if you go down to the gym, that you don't lose a pound. That isn't how it works. And if you go to the gym 4 times this week, you're not 4 pounds lighter. If you are, you quickly find out that that was water weight, because if you do it for 3 straight weeks in a row, you're not down 12 pounds. So people run cost benefit analysis, and the cost benefit analysis is what decides what it is that they're going to do. So they essentially make an assessment of the costs, and they make an assessment of the benefits. This is why it is that you do everything. This is actually the nature of the human mind, and it goes beyond this. It's the nature of all minds. In other words, this is what animals do, is they run cost-benefit analysis on every flicker of every whisker of every animal that ever lived. The reason why they flicker that whisker is that there's been a cost-benefit analysis. Now, it's not the kind of, they don't have the conscious play-by-play announcer in their heads the way that we do about our cost-benefit analysis. In other words, we can actually be thinking in English or Spanish or whatever else it is. We are aware to some degree of the cost-benefit analysis that we're running, but our conscious awareness is only the tip of the iceberg on how subtle that cost-benefit analysis is. It turns out that experiments in psychology have shown that if we use an MRI machine, we can actually predict as much as 10 seconds in advance what a person is going to do in a decision, and we can know before they know what they're going to do. In other words, if you ask them to report their decision as fast as they have made it, they will finally tell you, okay, I'm going to pick the blue poster over the red poster. It's going to turn out that if you were staring at an MRI machine of their brain, you could have predicted what they were going to do 10 seconds before they did it. Okay, so this starts to tell us that the cost-benefit analysis is actually both complicated, and it's also largely unconscious. So now we're gonna take this back to the notion of positive changes. So let's suppose we have someone who's wanting to change their diet, or for example, they're wanting to quit smoking, or they're wanting to institute an exercise program, etc. Whatever it is that they're doing, what's happening is their mind is running a complicated cost-benefit analysis all the time, and they have many considerations to take care of. They've got 2 kids, they've got to get into school, they've got a husband or a wife, they've got a job, they've got a boss, they've got church, they've got a class that they're taking, they've got relatives, they've got some pain in the neck in-laws. They have all kinds of things that they're considering that are involved in actually every decision that they make. So are you going to go run back to the store because you ran out of Yukon Gold potatoes? Well, maybe not, because I've got to get to sleep, because I've got to get to work early the next day. This is actually what's happening, is that the mind is making multitudes of decisions based on a lot of moving parts and a lot of details. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to actually shift the pattern of behavior in a positive direction, away from what I'm going to call equilibrium. So we see that people's lives in general are highly repetitive, that they make the same decisions over and over again, and they have the very same pattern over and over again. The reason why that's true is not because they're lazy and not because they're not inspired or they've got some emotional block generally. What's happening is that they are in a cost-benefit equilibrium, that the basic factors of their life are pretty stable. It's the same people, it's the same job, it's the same kids, it's the same in-laws, it's the same refrigerator, and it's the same Tupperware. And as a result, what's going to happen is that behavior is going to tend to be highly repetitive because the cost-benefit analysis is about the same, that there's no radical change in the costs or the benefits from day to day. So therefore, if a person has been sort of flaky on their program for the last 3 months, it's very likely that they're going to be flaky on their program the next 3 months, because the very same cost-benefit analysis that led to the flakiness in the last 3 months is going to be the same cost-benefit that is going to be involved in the next 3 months. They have the very same decisions to make about what things to sacrifice and which things to pursue as they did before. So, what's the key to positive change? Key to positive change is to change the factors that are involved in the cost-benefit analysis. So let me give you an example of where we see radical positive change. So this helps us get insight into how this works. My friend, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, is it's not truly a sadistic streak, but it's something that is a little bit like it. And that is that if you call him up and you say, Dr. Goldhammer, I'm in the McDougall program and I'm trying hard to do this, but I'm struggling with really making these changes. And he says, okay, well, join the club. We've got another 10,000 people behind you. And you say, I'm thinking about maybe coming in to True North or to come to the McDougall program. And he'll say, good idea. And he'll say, what pain are you in? If you say, oh, I'm not in any pain, he's very disappointed. Okay, he's like, that's really too bad that you're not in any pain. Here's what he loves to hear. I'm in an excruciating pain. Okay, I think I have ulcerative colitis. Nothing makes my friend Dr. Alan Goldhammer happier than to hear that you're in excruciating pain. Then he's happy about you going to one of these programs, and he'll tell you, please come to one of the programs, whether it's ours or someone else's, because you will probably get a lot better fast. This is what we see at the McDougall program so often. We have people come in, and if they're in pain, they can be out of pain within the 10-day program. Nothing makes a doctor happier than watching you get out of pain, and nothing makes these plant-based doctors happier than this happening, because they know that the pain, getting rid of the pain, is a tremendous benefit. And this acts like a guidance system inside of people's behavior to make them unbelievably compliant. So I cannot tell you how many people I have seen over the years out of these programs where what happens is because the pain is removed, they have a magnificent experience over the next year as they do a great job. If you come in and you're in no pain at all, you're just doing this for some personal growth, this is going to be a lot harder because the motivation is not as great. This doesn't mean you're a weaker person. It just means that the cost-benefit analysis won't change as easily. This is also a reason why we're going to generally have more success with people that come to an inpatient program like the 10-day program, because they can get to see fairly significant changes that will take place during their time there. And so as a result, at the end, they're more inspired because they have better touch with the benefits. The problem is that if you had significant health problems and we could change them in a day as a result of changing your dietary patterns in a day, we would have a great deal more success. But the issue is the body's pretty tough, and it's usually in some kind of a compromised state, and it's doing okay on the mediocre diet that the person is doing. And one day of dietary change a lot of times isn't enough to have anything significant happen. So it sometimes is, believe it or not, sometimes in 24 hours, people that have autoimmune conditions can be much better. So with digestive difficulties, sometimes it's that much better very quickly. Those people have more motivation to change and have more success as a result of the rapid change. So where are we now? Cost-benefit analysis. So let's suppose that we're not hurting that much. We don't have any significant pains. So if we make a change, we're not suddenly radically out of life-altering circumstances because the pain is now magically been lifted. So we're just a regular, pretty healthy person that's got, I don't know, 30 or 40 or 50 pounds to lose. And we have heard that the McDougall diet is a very good lifestyle to use for the rest of your life. And as a result, we want to do this adoption. We want to do it, but we're finding that we're battling the cost-benefit analysis. This is more standard. And this is where life gets difficult making changes because there are a bunch of costs that we're going to be adding to the equation. Let's look at what some of those costs are. One one of the costs are going to be, there's going to be social issues that are going to be difficult. So suddenly we're going to be at odds with some other people to some degree. We're going to be left out. We're going to be seen as a threat, etc. So that's why I've shot video on this question, which I call like getting along without going along, in order to coach people how it is that we're going to step around the costs that are associated with the social costs associated with making changes. Also, don't feel like you have to change your whole family. So this is, again, now going to add a bunch of costs to this, that this is like making too big of an investment. So if you think that some stock is a good investment, don't put everything in it. Don't shove every nickel you have into, I don't know, some mining stock that's supposed to go up a bunch. Forget it. If it's a good big investment, it's a good small investment. So the investment for you should be to do it for yourself for a while to see what happens. And you don't have to force this on your children or your relatives or your husband or anybody else under the sun. Just go to the effort for yourself to see how it is that you feel and see whether or not you get benefits, and leave everybody else alone. And that's a way to reduce the amount of social tension and social disruption that are going to be involved. Now, probably my favorite concept is the concept of small details as they influence cost-benefit analysis. So this is inspired, this insight was inspired by research that was done in the 1960s by a character by the name of Howard Leventhal, who is an experimental social psychologist. So let me describe what it is that he did so that we can appreciate what happened. What he did was he was running an experiment on the influences of attitude change versus small differences in what we're going to call channel factors, or factors associated with the execution of behavior. So this is what he did. He had two presentations, I believe they were videotaped, of a person, like a professor, explaining to a class why it is that they should get a tetanus shot. So they've got two presentations for like 60 minutes, and they're exactly the same, except at the end of one of the presentations, what they added for 30 seconds was the following instructions. They said, by the way, there will be in the first condition, they said, oh, and by the way, there are tetanus shots available for the next 2 weeks over at the Student Health Center. That's it. That's what they said. In the second condition, the same 60-minute presentation, at the end they said, oh, and by the way, there are tetanus shots available over at the health center for the next 2 weeks. Think about when you could fit that into your schedule in the next 2 weeks. And here is a map. As you leave the building today, the TAs will be handing you a map that will show you where the health center is. Think through when it would be convenient for you to stop by. That's it. So the two same presentations, 60 minutes of outpouring of persuasive messages about why this was so important. And then at the end, the difference is stop by the health center the next 2 weeks, or stop by the health center the next 2 weeks. Think about when it would fit into your schedule. And here's a map of where the student health center is. Wow. Who on earth would think that there would be any difference between these two groups in their outcomes? So let's look at the score and see if we can learn something about positive change from this experiment. It turns out in the first condition that 3% of the people showed up at the health center over the next 2 weeks. Okay, not surprising. Persuasive appeals usually have very small rates of return. I guess the Reverend Billy Graham just passed away. This was a sort of an extraordinary person that spent his life on the stump, basically trying to persuade people to join his church. And it turns out that in studies that have been done of Mr. Graham, that generally when he would have 100,000 people in the Rose Bowl, for example, that less than 1% of people would be making any changes. That's what they were able to determine. So despite how talented and how beautiful a persuasive appeal usually is, the impact is usually quite small. And so Howard Leventhal's study showing a 3% impact on this is not surprising at all. The was actually a pretty good impact. Now we're going to go, we can have a little drum roll in the background as we're going to now look at what happens to the group that got 30 more seconds of instructions. That's all they got. They got a map and they were told, think when in the next 2 weeks you might be able to stop by that would be convenient in your schedule. That group, 27% of people showed up. 9 times the amount of people showed up in the second group than in the first group. Okay, this is very important, folks. This is what we call channel factors. Think of behavior as running in channels down a mountainside. And if you have a big rock in the way, then the water can't go past that rock. It goes around it and goes somewhere else. Behavior is similar. It flows down the paths of least resistance. And so this has been named channel factors by experimental social psychologists as they're aware at how important it is, these very small channels of the translation of attitude into action. Very small impediments can make an enormous difference in how often an attitude gets, which in this case, obviously the attitude that the kids needed to do something about this was actually pretty high. The persuasive appeal was excellent. What was happening, though, is the translation into action was extremely small because there was impediments. Those impediments were not massive. They were actually very small impediments. And so it turns out that very fine details wind up being the secrets of change. Not big, massive, cataclysmic changes of personality or insight. It turns out that the secrets of change, a positive change, lay in the fine details. So now I'm going to talk about another one of my heroes. I've got a whole bunch of them. The experimental social psychologists Richard Nisbett and Lee Ross at Stanford University and Richard Nisbett, University of Michigan, were the masters of pointing out to psychologists that these channel factors are all important in understanding changes in behavior. Later on, I would translate the concept of channel factors into what you all have recognized as what I call energy conservation. So effectively, that's what channel factors are, is they're little features of energy that would be required to get something done. And if that energy is up just a little bit, then what happens is that the cost just goes up in the cost benefit analysis and the behavior gets stopped. So I like to think of this as moving a refrigerator against a very slick floor. And let's suppose it doesn't have wheels. It has just those little metal pads that it sits on, little 4 feet, and you're sliding it across a very slick concrete floor. And you can do it without too much effort. And then you run into a tiny little piece of sand on the floor that hits one of those little metal feet, and suddenly you're stopped. Okay? The tiniest little thing stops you just because it's now going to require more energy to get past that, and your ability to move that refrigerator just got stopped. So fine details of energy expenditure wind up being important when it comes to the execution of behavior. Now, another one of my heroes in this life is the great basketball coach, the late basketball coach John Wooden of UCLA. He looked at the problem of coaching quite a bit differently than the people that had come before him, and he's now recognized as the most influential athletics coach that has ever lived. Let me tell you about how it is that he saw things, because it's very important for us. Wooden saw the problem of coaching as problems of very, very fine details. He was not inspirational. Previous to Wooden, the concept of coaching was to be very inspirational, and to the famous Newt Rockne at Notre Dame was known for making fiery speeches and tell them that they should win one for the Gipper, all this sort of thing. That this was the glory of coaching, was how inspiring that you could be. John Wooden was much more like a minister. He like a very quiet little English professor that he was. He was very fastidious in how it is that he organized things, because his attitude was, I can't inspire you. If you don't love to do this and you don't want to do this, I'm not going to talk it into you. My job is to make sure that you can be successful. My job is to actually set up situations where you are very likely to execute the behavior well over and over again. And that's what I'm here to do. So he looked at the NCAA rulebook, and it told him that he had 2 hours and 15 minutes for practice for his varsity. And he knew that there was about 120 days. He knew exactly how many days it was. And he began the year by realizing he had, whatever that was, 242 and a half hours legally in order to create a national champion. That's what he had to do. He had a certain players that he had, and he had 242 and a half hours, or whatever this was, down to the minute. That's the time that he had. Now, some other coach would just cheat, but not John Wooden. He wasn't going to do it. He basically, this is what I'm going to do. This is the parameters, and this is specifically my job, is to make the most of the time that I have with these players. So Wooden's practices were organized far better than anybody's practices ever in history. He would analyze each player and think through their weaknesses, where it is that they should be spending most of their time on that in practice. And he would organize his practice like an interwoven ballet. And he would have station drills where the players would only do something for about 2 or 3 minutes, because after that they would get bored with it. So he would have this organized like a Swiss watch. And to explain just how organized this was, he would have the situation would be that some other coach would have to move the balls around. So they'd have to roll the balls from one end of the floor to the other, because now we're going to work at the other side of the basketball court. Wooden's team never had to roll the balls anywhere, because it was all organized in advance where the balls would be, so they didn't have to spend the 15 seconds rolling a ball from one end to the court to the other. If you can imagine how intricately this was designed so that not a single second would be wasted, that's how he did it. That's amazing. I played basketball in high school and a little bit in college. My coaches weren't anything like that. They didn't even remotely try to do anything of the kind. They'd sit there and talk to us for 5 minutes and explain what they wanted. This is never how a Wooden team was coached. Wooden's teams were coached like a Swiss watch, and the players, even 30 years later, will tell you that there was nothing like a Wooden practice, that they loved them, because it was the feeling of achievement that came with making the most of every second for 2 hours and 15 minutes was exhilarating. And they never had that experience again in their lives. Now, these are the keys to positive change, and that is be meticulously organized. Get things organized so that we are working on things and things are flowing very well. There are many people that are very good at this kind of thing with respect to food. Chef AJ, can show you all kinds of things to do and get things organized well. Jeff Novick at the 10-day program is spectacular at explaining how it is that you need to put things in your freezer. You need to rotate things through so that you always have something that you made 2 weeks ago coming up. Here's an example of this, just in case you guys thought that I was completely incompetent, which is close, in the kitchen. This is a Novick-inspired thing. It's a spaghetti. It was made on Monday, 1/22. So I made a big bunch of it, and then I have high-quality Tupperware that has the right amount that can be frozen, so that when I unfreeze this, it's going to be good for basically 2 days worth of spaghetti. So it's all organized in this way. So I've got a bunch of stuff in the freezer. I've got usually 3 different entrees rotating through there, so that something good is always coming up that I haven't had for a week or two, and it's circling back around. this is Jeff explained to me how to do this, and it's life-saving in terms of way less energy being expended on this problem, as we now have essentially a conveyor belt of fine details where I'm now doing less work. Remember channel factors, and remember that channel factors are about energy conservation. And fundamentally, if the energy expended has to be just a little bit too much, then we can stop the behavior. We saw that 24 out of the 27% of children in college kids in group 1 that would have gone to the health center to get their shot did not go because of 30 seconds worth of consideration that they did not do. This is the planning. This is the meticulous detail. And this is where it is that when we are trying to figure out why we are not executing an attitude that we very much want to turn into action, which is what the McDougall program is. Healthy living, or a new attack on weight and getting in better shape and changing our life for the positive. We tend to wait for some big inspiring process that is going to have this cataclysmic change, and then now we're going to go for broke, etc. And now we're going to make this big personal change. This is rarely what causes positive personal changes. I'm not going to say that it can't happen. I'm just going to say that it usually doesn't. Most positive changes happen as a result of very fine details of somebody taking the time and energy to actually change something, so that the cost-benefit analysis that we're confronting on these daily practices of healthy living wind up getting shifted in a positive direction. So here's the kind of little details. I thought about these things as I was thinking about giving this talk this morning. Get Amazon to deliver good stuff on your schedule. So if you are getting bogged down by shopping, have somebody else do it for you. I find that they can pick my produce just as well as I can pick it for myself. So let's make sure that we don't run out of apples and oranges and bananas and things like that. We can have excellent Tupperware. Okay, so let's not have stuff that doesn't really do a good job closing, and then we freeze stuff and then it has freezer burn, etc. Let's make sure that it's all really good, and let's make sure that we've got the Tupperware in a variety of sizes so that it's the right sizes for the problems that you need to solve. So that's the right size for me for 2 really good servings of pasta. That's the size that I needed to put my pasta sauce in. If I put it in a big old honkin' thing, then I don't even want to unfreeze it, because now it's more pasta sauce than I want, and now I feel like I'm going to waste it, and then I don't even use it. Okay, these are the little channel factors that wind up stopping people from executing behaviors. I have a good feeling today. I'm taking this out of the freezer right now. This morning, I decided, hey, I'm going to now defrost that today, and by this evening, I'm going to be working on 2 big servings of pasta for myself over the next couple of days. And it's variety. So now the notion, if I have a big old pot of soup and I've got it in there all week, that's not the way I'm going to do things, because by the time I have 3 or 4 helpings of something, I'm done. So it's not so good to depending upon who you are, that isn't necessarily a good strategy. A good strategy is to have it saved so that you can then rotate it through, and you can have novelty and variety in a stream that makes sense to you. John Wooden would make sure that he had those station drills not too long. Okay, I played for other coaches that they learned about station drills, but they would have their station drills go on for a long time, and kids would be getting bored. After 5 or 7 or 10 minutes at a station drill doing a single fundamental, like just rebounding off the board and then trying to land on 2 feet and make a pivot, it's like after 5 minutes, you're totally bored and you're doing a sloppy job. Okay, but instead, he figured out over the years how long to do the station drills for, so that it kept interesting, and then moved to the next drill. It's all very interesting. The principles of success are translatable from one problem to the next. As I'm sure Dr. Tolosa here could tell any aspiring pianist, that there are drills that you need to do that are the keys to success, and you need to do them. But also as a teacher, you have to move the problems around so that they're interesting. For people who are well-to-do and have very busy lives. For goodness sakes, hire a cook. And now that may not be wise for most of us because it might not make sense financially or logistically for various reasons. But there are people for whom that is exactly the right solution. So that what you need to have is you need to have healthy food in your kitchen, easily available. The last thing you need to do if you come home and you're a neurosurgeon is to decide that you're going to have to start chopping up a bunch of vegetables and face that for an hour and 20 minutes. No, have it done for you, etc. Now, if you're going to travel, you might want to have some healthy frozen food available for you, Plant Pure Nation or something like that. Let me see what other issues I'm going to talk about. Those are, we've talked about the McDougall program for years, having a menu for a week with the shopping list associated with it and maybe two of them so that we don't get bored. So we have menu A and menu B, and we rotate those through your life. These are all, a lot of people won't do this, and that's fine. And they won't necessarily fail, but I expect that they won't as often get things done in a routine fashion and get into a really good groove. The people that have a lot of success in this are not people that make some cataclysmic decision where it is that they have this transformative psycho experience that now suddenly they do it. What happens instead is they make small detailed changes. And as beginning to make small detailed changes, they find themselves now suddenly they're doing things differently because the Tupperware is better, or they clean out the pantry and just get rid of all kinds of crap. And now there's room for the materials that you need to store the things that you need, and it's easily accessible. Okay. We get a bunch of stuff out of the refrigerator that you don't need. Now there's room for everything that we can easily reach in there and get the things that we want to get. Otherwise, there's too much crap in the way. These are these small factors. I'll close with a story that I've told before about a woman that came to the 10-day program who is raising 7 sons in the Midwest. 7 times they went to the well and hoping to get a daughter. And no luck, 7-0. So she's raising 7 sons. And she told us a story that paying attention to these energy factors was very useful. She had trying to get these boys to eat some grapes. So she put them in a big spaghetti colander and put them in there and rinsed them off and put them in the refrigerator. Nobody ate them. And she thought, I just wonder if this energy thing would work. So she actually went to the trouble of picking them all off of the stalk and just putting them in a bowl. And she said they were gone in no time. Now, this is remarkable. And I've noticed myself that when it comes to eating apples, I'm not wild about eating apples because it's a little bit challenging. I'm always worried about hurting my teeth, pulling on my front teeth because one of my front teeth isn't too healthy since my sister boxed me in the mouth and we were kids. So I've got a tooth that's not too great a shape. And so I'm always a little bit worried about it. And I'm also, it gets sticky. And then sometimes the skin can get between a couple of your teeth and it hurts. It's like, I'm not too wild about biting into an apple. But if you core an apple and you have those nice slices, oh, well, then I'm all excited about eating those slices. So I have 3 apple cores now, so that when one's in the dishwasher, I know there's another couple of them in the drawer. And I eat far more apples since I have an apple core than before I had an apple core. So this is an example of the little tiny details that can be responsible for us to make positive changes. They are the secrets to positive change because nobody's looking for them. And this isn't just for health. This is for everything. But this is the tiny little details. Paying attention to the small details can very often be the difference between a pattern of success towards change and a pattern of continued equilibrium where the very same challenges wind up in our lives and we never shake loose of them. So hopefully this will inspire you a little bit to go out and focus on making some of these positive changes. Get the right pots, get the right Tupperware, get the right apple core, get things organized, and start moving towards a life you deserve.
Thank you, Dr. Lisle. Very insightful. And, you mentioned something that I think you mentioned in other lectures about having someone else cook for you, or at least chop and have cut. Maybe it doesn't have to be a chef that you hire. Maybe it could be a college student or a high school student that I think I've heard you mention that.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I've had from time to time. Yeah, they rotate through and they fall in love and leave you. You know what I mean?
Right.
This happens. But then, I'm always circling around looking for someone that is some young, inspired person that is interested in food, that is looking for a modest paying job, and very often I'll have someone that does this, and it takes a bunch of the burden off. And this is this makes life easier, makes it better.
Yes, it certainly does. But the techniques that Jeff Novick gives about cooking meals and putting them in the freezer, like you're saying,
Yes.
Wonderful. Someone was asking earlier what kind of pasta you use.
Yes. I happen to like a combination of soy whole wheat pasta. That's what I use. Yeah, I'll cook up a pretty big pot of it, and it will last for probably about 10 days. So I'll eat pasta probably 3 times over those 10 days whenever I make it.
Right.
Yes.
Someone was saying here, are you limiting in any way, say, your quantity of pasta? What do you do if your sensors are not telling you I'm satisfied after having a big meal of totally compliant food?
Yes.
I think you talked about that yesterday.
Yes. I would go back to the September 2017 webinar that Gustavo and I did called the Condition Cram.
Right.
And look at that, because if you've eaten totally compliant food and you're full, and then probably I'm gonna guess that this is in the evening, that you find yourself getting into the granola bars or whatever it is afterwards. Look at the Condition Cram for the answer to that question.
Yeah. And as we close, Dr. Lisle, I just want to remind everybody that, of course, I think most people here know, but we always have new people, that you are the psychologist for the McDougall Wellness Program. You also work at True North Health Center, and that you have a website called Esteem Dynamics that I will type here for people to see, and that they can have a session with you by phone. And I can tell you all, 30 minutes with Dr. Lisle or an hour will certainly help you transform your life and your health. So take advantage of that. I'll type it here. I also want to let everybody know that there are programs coming up at the McDougall Center, the 10-day program, the 3-day intensive program. So go to the website and check those out. And thank you again, Dr. Lisle, for being here for us today. That was great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Gustavo, and I'll see you next month.
All right. Very good. And this webinar will be sent to all of you as a replay by tonight or tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.
See you, folks.
All right. Bye-bye.